If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I've brought up my mom a few times on the show before. Shar is like one of the biggest Pirates fan, and she is like the eternal optimist. So when she gives you a call on a Monday night as the Pirates lose to the Reds 7-1, and asks me a similar question to what she asked me at our Easter brunch, which is like, what is going on here and what is wrong with the Pirates? It just makes me stop and think for just a second. Before we hopped on here, Scott, talking about how difficult it is in baseball to just be so bad on the offensive side of things that you are setting historical records. Yeah, it's been tough to watch at times. Obviously, still watching almost every single game. But first question, how you doing, brother?
Well, even though the Pirates' offensive ineptitude continues, seeing the defense come around has been encouraging. It's one thing to lose these games and just get nickel and dimed and death by a thousand paper cuts because a single here, single there, home runs even. But to watch games where you give them extra runs because of misplays, errors, mental and physical, throwing to the wrong base, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. Seeing the Pirates over the last few games be more solid defensively really has given me some more hope, along with things like Donnie Kelly's managing of the team at the moment and the return of Gene Lamont and his influence to the Pirates system.
Yeah, Gene Lamont. I mean, that's just kind of like one of those throwbacks. I think that I was expecting maybe Lloyd McClendon to follow him out or something. We did see Jimmy Leland sitting there at a game, because he does have that soft spot, and for a good reason, for guys like Donnie Kelly, for Gene Lamont. But I did like to see that, just because, I mean, we had talked about this, is that how young of a staff it is sitting in there right now, or inexperienced to a degree. I know that, Oscar Marine has been the pitching coach for his entire time there, but this is his first, he's the pitching coach. Before that, kind of plucked from different things. So to have a guy with that type of experience does make me kind of a little bit happy, just because he's a guy that's been around the game for his entire life. And I said that to you, that I like that he said, yeah, I'm just not here to just kind of sit there and just, not participate. He wants to be involved in those games. He's sitting at, the top of the railing, watching the games and following stuff. And he may be seeing stuff with certain players that, other people might not notice. It's definitely it's a positive thing to bring somebody in like that. And I believe that it was just somebody had to have said okay, we need to get somebody in here with experience. I know there was some, I don't know if it was jokes or just tossing around of bringing Neil Walker down. John Wayner, everybody knows how I feel about Wayner. I think he would fit into that type of role, very well, but he might be comfy up there in the press box, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did need to not just fill that position with maybe somebody that was still, you know, already in there. I know that, Mike Rabello was the de facto kind of bench coach until Lamont was brought in. But you just bring somebody in with some kind of experience, which is something we talked about even with the manager position, is, you need a guy with more experience. Maybe Derek Shelton's time was done. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about an old school baseball mind. I mean, even in this new era of baseball and what he can bring to the team.
Yeah, it diversifies things. You don't just have one particular mindset that is so invested in one particular way of doing things. And you have a guy who has a proven track record as a manager, led the White Sox to the playoffs in the early 90s, was the manager of the Freak Show Pirates, finished second in NL Manager of the Year that year. Among all the experience he had with Leland, and of course Leland saying that at 80 years old or whatever that he doesn't want to go back to the dugout, but and then you get the classic Gene Lamont wit where they were asking him about coming back, and he's like, well, I did tell Donnie Kelly if I have to manage 2 out of every 4 games, I'm not going to come back. Saw that on Wednesday's game. There was a difficult call against O'Neill Cruz that maybe an umpire fell victim to a frame job by the catcher, which is part of the catcher's job. It was kind of a late strike 3 call on Cruz, and Donnie was kind of jawing with the umpire a little bit, and he started walking towards him, and Lamont said something to him, and he came back to the dugout. We know that Donnie Kelly's his own man, but at the same time, having that mentorship of a Gene Lamont to be able to say, right now is not the time. It's early in the game. You know, you're more valuable to the team right now. Now is not the time to get them fired up or whatever. And they end up going through and winning the game. And like Greg Brown mentioned after the game, and we're recording Thursday night as the game is still on, but said that in games that Don Kelly manages the whole game so far, he's 5-5. So it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's like a kind of like a good thing, is because I mean you are kind of the man now. You're not and not that the bench coach. I mean, we talked about those responsibilities during last week's show, that there's a lot of stuff that he's doing behind the scenes, but you can't be the guy that goes off and goes chirping. Like, you are the man. Like, you're gonna have to hand that lineup card to somebody else to kind of take over the situation. And you maybe need to kind of pick your places as to, okay, this is a place where I need to argue for my player. This is a place where, this kind of makes sense. And this may be where I just, get to chirp a little bit, let them know my, distaste for what they're doing, and then kind of move on from it. Yeah, it's definitely, it's a good move by the Pirates to kind of do that. And like I said, I love nostalgia with that team, and seeing Gene Lamont back there, it does bring back some good memories. And we need almost, I feel like, anything we can get as Pirates fans this year, because I feel like people are just kind of getting lost in, yeah, this season's over and let's just move on, and let's just like, there's not baseball to be played right now. And me and us as, as a collective, like to talk about the actual game that's going on the field, and
right,
what can make this team better, and what can, move this team forward, because you do have a decent amount of young players that will be important beyond, 2025. And I'm not putting 2025 in the rear view yet, but I still feel like that you always have to be looking forward to what the team composition will look like in 2026, 2027. And you kind of, sent me a message and was just like, this is something we definitely have to talk about. And I totally agreed with it, was that, with Henry Davis, and especially, the type of game that he had, he is their best defensive catcher right now. And, that's obvious. I mean, Joey Bart has never been a defensive stalwart, but, it seems to be like, as soon as like Paul Skeens is choosing you as his personal catcher, you've caught for Mitch Keller a couple times. you definitely have a better arm. You have a better pop time. And you start to do different things. Obviously, the hitting, we believe, in at least for a while there, was what was going to drive him
Mhm.
to get
Yeah.
more playing time. But then also, it's just like, well, if you're only getting, you know, say 8, 9 plate appearances a week, like how are we even going to know what that offense is going to be like? I think that at times he's been pressing out there to try to do well, but I mean, as a catcher, what he's done over the past couple of years to kind of get himself into the spot where, like, I could remember, like, when we had, better defensive catchers. I mean, God knows, like Austin Hedges or people like that, it'd be like, well, Henry Davis is in the game. Well, I can notice when he's in the game. I mean, even with like a Yasmani Grandal, who's not, the best defensive catcher, it's like, well, I can kind of notice, well, Henry's in the game. Well, now I'm noticing Henry's in the game because of how well he's doing behind the plate, not because of just some little missteps here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that something that I've said was that I didn't know how Henry could manage the pitching staff. But it seems like you said, becoming essentially the personal catcher for Paul Skeens really is a vote of confidence. And he's worked so hard. But that's something that we said from the beginning is that we don't think anybody is going to outwork Henry Davis. The work ethic that he has is second to none. And his offense was the priority in Louisville, and it drove him to be the 1-1 pick. But we've seen how well he's worked at it, how hard he's worked at it to improve his play calling, his his defensive skills. Um, the hitting is the last thing to come around, which is a bit of irony, considering his draft status and everything. But things like you said, the pop time, the arm. He's been gunning out runners at second. Even something small like the way he deked, I think it's Spencer Steer at home during the game on Wednesday, and just playing that. I think Greg Brown called it the Statue of Liberty play. Just kind of standing there like there's no play, and then at the last possible second catching and laying the tag down. If that buys you an extra second, that will relate to inches, and that's made all the difference in that play. So he's got the mind for the game. He's got the baseball IQ. And he had an RBI single on Wednesday as well. So, um, things are coming around. And as Bart's bat cools, and of course the defense isn't there, that brings up this idea that you want to get Bart the at bats because he's shown that he can produce and that he can contribute. But at the same time, you need that defense from Henry because it just feels like a different game. It feels like a different team when they're playing well defensively. And Henry can be a big part of that in the way he manages the game, manages the infield. Um, and so going forward, I'd like to see, but we have this jam at DH, which by nature you would, especially in today's game where offense is so important and defense does kind of get to be a second thought. Um, you want to get Kutch in, but Kutch isn't really hitting. You want to take Reynolds out of the field when you can. And then Bart, you want to get him out from behind the plate and give Henry more opportunities and allow him to run the game more. So it's something that we've been bringing up for quite a while is that, you only have a certain number of at-bats to go around for DH and trying to fit all of these guys in. If you can put Canario in left and keep Reynolds and maybe rotate out Reynolds and McCutcheon in right, and that frees up the DH position a little bit so that you can give some of these guys. You still want to give Cruz a couple, maybe one a week or one every other week at DH. It's just a lot of pieces that can be shifted around. It's a Rubik's cube.
Yeah, and I could never solve a Rubik's cube, and I
Mm-mm.
don't know if
No,
I can solve this.
my
This.
grandmother had one, and I peeled the stickers off, and I put. That's how I fixed it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think to myself because it's like, okay, well, Reynolds sits, but do you want to have Reynolds sit to get his back going, and then you have Bart who doesn't have his back going, um, and that's why he was playing so much But now that that's kind of cooled off, you want to get Henry back in there more, but it's not like Bart is like this ancient catcher who you're going to get rid of after this year. That DH position, like I feel like it causes more problems, at least for the Pirates, when you don't have somebody that's solidified in that position and is hitting well. And I follow other teams, so I don't know exactly how they deal with it all the time. But yeah, I mean, I was just looking kind of at Joey Bart, and over his last 15 games that he's been in, the OPS is under 600. It's kind of the same for McCutcheon. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to, if it's like a Bart day to catch, to have, Henry start taking, some of those DHs, or, you know, to get his bat in the lineup, because that's what you were doing with Bart, while at the same time having him catch a little bit more as well, to kind of balance that out a little bit. Because I don't know, what Donnie Kelly's idea is for, I mean, obviously some games when you have the late night and you have the turnaround, that's obviously, usually going to bring in the new catcher, but to, have them more, 50-50 split time, but then give Henry an extra DH day in there to kind of even out the lineup a little bit, because you would hope also that Bart's bat is going to come around, because I mean, you have a guy who in, less than a full season, obviously, ends up having like 13 home runs. We haven't seen that power from Bart this year at all, but we know it's in there. So you want to have that in there as much as possible. So it's going to be kind of a way to find a balance. But I mean, I think that it also comes down to what we've talked about more than once, is that, just not enough guys in this lineup are hitting. So if everybody's hitting, it kind of causes like a log jam. But then also when nobody's hitting, it kind of makes another type of log jam,
Right.
with your Rubik's Cube thrown in.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you'll take a log jam if everybody's hitting, but it's a little tougher to navigate that when nobody's hitting, which is
Yeah,
what they're seeing right now. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely been, very tough for this team. Obviously, don't know if they're going to score, more than 4 runs tonight. I got a little bit frustrated because we had actually won 2 games in a row, and that was like the tagline that some people posted right at the beginning, and I'm like, can I just enjoy this win for like just a second? Because I know that it may not mean anything in the long run, but I go into every single game cheering for my team to win, and when they do, the last thing I want to hear, at least, and the first thing out of people's mouths, is that little bit of negativity. But I mean, I know that people can't help it right now, because I mean, there isn't a lot to be positive about. I mean, the team's not scoring runs, the team's losing. You have one of your promising pitchers in Jared Jones, going under the knife. You have, everybody wants Bubba called up, but then you get Burrows. So then there's frustration about that. And it just seems like everything is kind of snowballing for the Pirates right now. On a day that we win, I want to enjoy it. Are you looking for coverage of all 4 major sports leagues? NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. Look no further than SportsVival. At SportsVival, they are dedicated to providing quality sports analysis, up-to-date news, and original content with a focus on draft and prospects, analyzing how teams are built and how franchises evolve through their strategic decisions. Without sports, how would we survive? SportsVival, proud partners of Bucs in the Basement. It definitely has not been easy. Jones, I mean, we could just talk about this, is that it's something that wasn't 100% guaranteed, and I understand why you do those types of things, where it's like, well, it's not surgery just yet, so let's just rest this. But then I listened back to the episode that we did when he went down, and it was just basically like, I mean, you gave an option of like Garrett Cole, and you try to get going through the season, and it's like, it's ultimately going to happen. So I understand like why it's like, okay, there's this chance that if we just let this rest, that it will heal itself. But it just kind of seems like I don't know of too many cases where it's like, okay, this guy's having elbow pain. There's some damage in the UCL, or it's at least a strain or a sprain or whatever it may be, that it doesn't lead to Tommy John. So like, I'm not saying like, okay, do a preemptive strike, but now, I mean, we're sitting here that was like 2 months ago, and your timeline's 10 to 12 months. Well, I don't know if you follow that timeline because we see what happens with the Oviedo and all that kind of other stuff, but like, yeah, you just lost 2 months. Like, I think that if you asked anybody, we knew what was going to happen here. Everybody was hopeful that he was going to be able to come back. But the number of times that people can come back, like, to me, it's just like, just get it done. And
Yeah.
at that time, you're repairing what is, in essence, the beginnings of a partial tear, as opposed to a more serious type of situation. I don't know. That's just my feeling about it. I understand why, like, you do that, because it's just like, okay, we don't want to do it unless it's absolutely necessary. But like I said, show me a time when a guy had that type of symptoms, that type of injury, that they didn't end up getting Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, I think that the press conference that Todd Tomzak did yesterday was kind of telling, because he kept bringing up Jared's camp. Jared and his camp didn't want to do this. And so we have to remember, it is a business and this is his career. And I'm sure that he wasn't enthusiastic about the idea of being on the shelf. Luckily, the surgery that did happen isn't a Tommy John. It's the internal brace, it's the repair, not a
Yeah.
reconstruction. So that does shorten the time frame some. So they were saying that, instead of missing all the rest of this year and all of next year, because they waited, he could potentially help them win games next year. But it seems like the business decision kind of drove some of this. Maybe the Pirates would have opted to just do the surgery and it's going to happen. Let's just do it. But then you're relying on agents and parents and the athlete. Notice that nowhere in there is a doctor really necessarily consulted in so much. They're presented the options, the opinions, but I'm sure that they have what's in his business's best interest in mind. And hey, if he was that 1 in 100 that it works, then he's building his career. And John Wayner had a great point yesterday or on Wednesday. I guess I don't know when we'll put these out, but so we'll say Wednesday, when they were talking about if a Major League Baseball player plays on average 8 years, and you have this injury that causes you to lose 2 years, you're because of one injury, you're potentially losing a quarter of your career. And
Yeah.
that was like, oh wow, that's a great point, John. So he was very sympathetic to Jared's decision to, if there's any chance that this resting it could work, let's do that, and let me get back on the field.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just very, and then all of a sudden, like, obviously in the fans' mind, it's like they start counting out the months and start counting out to when he can come back and different types of stuff like that. To me, it's like, and I said this even with Oviedo during this past offseason, until I see him take the mound for the Pittsburgh Pirates in a regular season game, those timelines mean absolutely nothing to me, because we've seen, other players, even just like Oviedo this year. We went through JT Brubaker, although his was, like the full tear and everything, the full Tommy John, and Dowry Moretta. I mean, yeah, I'm glad that he's back pitching for the Indianapolis Indians, but I mean, I'm not a fan of the Indianapolis Indians. Like, I cheer for them. If I go to their games, I cheer for them, but I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So whatever Dowry Moretta is doing for the Indianapolis Indians right now does absolutely nothing for me. Like, I'm glad that he's back. It seems to be that he's on the right path.
Mhm.
But until he's out there pitching meaningful games for the Pirates, and as in meaningful games would be that he's actually pitching in a game where he's getting balls and strikes called in Major League Baseball, to me, it's like I put those people, like, I don't count Jared Jones for next year at all in my mind. You have to plan for something else. Just like when people were planning for Johan Oviedo for this year and putting him in the fifth spot, and we have him, and this is going to be that. Like, I can't. Like, when a guy gets a surgery like that and the time frame for him to even realistically start throwing and different stuff comes up, like, Jared Jones is not a part of my 2025 vision for the Pirates pitching staff. If he comes back and does that, that's a bonus. That's icing on the cake for me.
Yeah, yeah, certainly not counting on him. Definitely rooting for him to take the
Oh,
mound next
absolutely.
year. Yeah, yeah, and I know you feel the same way. When they say 10 to 12 months, I'm thinking, in the best case scenario, that's when he starts picking up a baseball and starting to build up. That's not in my mind. This is when he's coming back to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and
Yeah.
so I'm thinking 10 to 12 months. And I know Charrington said, that he can see him helping them win games next year. That comes when that, and he typically doesn't go that far. He's very measured in what he says. But I think that it's encouraging. We got to have something to look forward to, because that's just the history of this franchise for the last 30 years. Of, well, let's look forward to some. Always have to have something to look forward to, not necessarily something to be excited about right now. But it could be worse. We have teams that are dealing with issues as well. The Orioles. They just fired their manager as well, and they have a very similar record, if not a little worse than the Pirates at the moment. Um, they can beat the Brewers, though, apparently. Maybe a little tougher for the Pirates to do that. But that is something, like, just to bring up that point of, like, we talked about it a few weeks ago, where what's tougher to not have resources and the team not necessarily try and you fail, or the Orioles ownership getting a new owner, or the fans getting a new owner, and then thinking, oh well, the bright days are here now, we're going to spend money and we're going to go for it, and then to have this kind of season. So yeah, we're always looking forward and looking to the better days that are ahead, because they can't get much worse than they are now. But yeah, the injury bug hurts, especially when you have these high hopes. And something that I think I tweeted this week is that potentially, if Jared Jones misses all of next year, the next time he picks up a baseball and pitches for the Pittsburgh Pirates, he will be in his arbitration years.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, and that's what, like, this type of injury can do to a player, to a pitching staff. And like you said, like I want the best for Jared. It's just like, honestly, like, and I've said this a million times on this show, and I will say it again, is the name on the front of the jersey means more to me than the name on the back of the jersey. It does. Like, it's who can help this team at this point in time. And I want him personally to get back and to at least have a career, because it was so promising. But in the end, like, it's like I got to think about, okay, we can't picture him in that pitching staff next year
Right.
when you're going into this offseason, when you're who's going to contribute, different things like that. Like, there's setbacks to injuries. There's all different types of things that can happen. So I just really can't do that. And for me, like, there's the other piece of, deciding when players come up, deciding when, they take certain paths. We saw Jared Jones take that path that I don't think anybody at the beginning of spring training last year saw him taking. And then, assuming certain players like maybe Bubba Chandler is going to take the same path and deserves that same path. And we'll have, oodles and oodles of success. And then, unfortunately, Mike Burrows did not have, the best season debut. He's debuted for the Pirates before out of the bullpen, and people clamoring for Bubba. And for me, like, I just kind of wanted to talk about like why Burrows over Bubba, and I think it's twofold. And I'll give you your speaking, and then I'll go at it because I could see you were ready to talk, and I got mine lined up as well, so I won't forget those. So I don't want you to lose your thought on that. What do you think, Scott?
Well, the thought I was just going to say was sorry to cut you off there, but the idea that you are seeing with Jared Jones, why you take your time with Bubba Chandler, because Jared Jones started the season with the team, which is something that was very uncharacteristic for the Pirates. And because they did not wait to manipulate that service time, he got the full year of service time. And now you'd be begging to have that year back now if you lose him for 2 full years.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something to think about, and that's like a piece of kind of like one of my points is that and I feel like that there was this year definitely did feel a little bit different. And I know that some people have like pointed to the fact that like, okay, maybe the Pirates didn't think that they were going to compete this year, or they didn't have like, that push forward. I mean, we've talked about, finishing 2023 on a high note, pushing into that, and then 2024 kind of goes pretty well in the beginning. Last year ends on a slide, and then, do we have enough pieces at this point in time? I mean, but for me, the one piece is, and it's no disrespect to Burrows whatsoever, is I kind of see that the Pirates view him as a player that could be bounced up and down. He's a player that, I know Majinski going down maybe was a little bit of a surprise. We might have pushed him more towards the bullpen, but as a player that, Cherington loves those guys with options that can be rotated in and out and put in for spot starts and then kind of fill in for a little bit if a guy's doing well. If there's an injury, then they may go back down. They may stay back up. And Bubba may be more of that guy that you would say, like, okay, I know that last year at the beginning of the year, it was like, okay, so what's the plan for Jared to get through the season? He may have to be shut down. He may have to go down and get the Ronzi treatment and, be down in Indianapolis for a little bit. But I think in their mindset, it was like, okay, we brought Jared up. I think we maybe want him to be up, for the entire season, not go back down, not have those struggles. And especially for Bubba, if you don't bring him up at the beginning, do you really want to bring Bubba up when maybe he's either not ready or could struggle? And then you have to have that talk of like putting him back down. I feel like Bubba is like the type of prospect that it's like, okay, once we bring him up, we kind of want to bring him up for the long term. We've seen, Henry bounced up and down. What has that done for his development? I mean, there's been other different players that have been kind of like a Nicholas, somebody else like that. It's like, is this really good? I think that with Bubba, it's like, okay, we want to bring him up. And when he comes up, he's going to stay up here for, the rest of his career, hopefully. The other piece to me is that, I mean, I've heard people say Bubba's rotting. He's rotting in AAA. And I just want to give you some stats of a man who is rotting. Over his last 3 starts, and if you're bringing a guy up, do you want to bring a guy up when he's struggling or when he's doing well? You would want to bring a guy up when he's doing well. Over his last 3 starts, Bubba Chandler has a 3.75 ERA. Not too terrible. Has those 20 strikeouts, all those videos, and I repost them myself because they're very cool to watch. of like the number of strikeouts he has in every game. He also has 9 walks, 2 hit by pitch, 1 wild pitch, and you know what I'm going with next, Scott, is the whip. His whip over his last 3 games is a 2.08. He hasn't been pitching that great. Turn on the TV. Watch the games. They've been giving you the free games. MLB TV is not that expensive. If you have, you know, if you have MLB TV, you automatically have MILB TV now. They've kind of wrapped it into there. It used to be a separate thing. Like, turn on some of those games and watch. Like, yeah, I mean, his stuff is like ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But the control, the walks, the 86 pitches, and I think 4 1/3 innings, like, that's not a guy who's rotting or dominating. That's a guy who is figuring things out. Is that saying that Bubba is going to be, a bust or what? That's where people's minds will go to next. No, it's a guy who has only pitched, and I think Cherington even said it in his press conference on Thursday, was that this guy's been pitching full time for 2 years.
Right.
He's got the talent. He's going to figure stuff out. Even when he has bad games, he can still make them look like good games. So, I mean, my thing is yeah, it's frustrating that Burrows struggled. I think he still has good stuff as well. But for people that are saying, oh, letting Bubba rot, why not Bubba? You're trying to control Super 2. Like, no, like, Bubba's overall numbers look really good, but recently he had a good game. I mean, he had a bad game, a good game, and even though the numbers kind of put it out that he only gave up like 2 earned runs, it wasn't like his greatest outing. So I'd rather have him come up. And he's not dominating like Skeens was last year. It's not the pressure of, winning the Rookie of the Year. To me, it's just like, this is like an actual baseball decision to keep him down.
I agree with that. I think that Skeens was undeniable last year. There was nothing they could do to manipulate that service time. But I think that no matter how he was pitching, you would see that with Bubba. You just, you don't want to waste that extra year, especially when there's nothing to play for. Henry comes up because they needed offense. We'll figure out where to play him. We just need to get his bat in the lineup. He needs to get something going for us. So it's easier to justify, and it's the right move to keep Bubba down right now so that he can. I wonder if that's a organizationally wide decision with some of these top prospects, because like Connor Griffin's been, lighting it up on fire, in low A. At least he was for a while there. And so to the point where you think, okay, he's going to get promoted. And then here he is still, playing in Bradenton. So there's nothing wrong, especially when there's nothing to play for this year. There's nothing wrong with, giving him a little more time in the oven.
Yeah. And I have, like I said, I have no problem with it. It's just, I understand the fans' frustrations, and it's like everything they do is in some ways going to be wrong. I mean, we have people out there on my timeline. Like I said, that's why I said I hate it here. I hate it in social media, but I look for stuff because I do like to see the highlights. I do like to see different stuff. Then I feel like I shouldn't share certain things, because then the next comment is automatically like a negative comment of almost cheering for Pirates players to fail just so you can get to your ultimate goal. Like, I think that, and we talked about this on different shows, is that unless there would be some miracle turnaround where Donnie Kelly, really gets this thing going and everybody heats up at the right time, and I don't even know if it's like get back to 500 for this year, but just play really good baseball, that there's a way that Ben Cherington could talk his way into keeping his job. If the year continues like this, I don't see how that's even possible. But to me, it's just like, why wouldn't you cheer for your team to do well? I think that the signs would be pointing, if I had a magic eight ball, would be pointing towards, you know, Ben Charrington. I don't know what he can really do to save his job at this point in time, but I'm not actively rooting for him to lose his job. Because if some of the guys that he picks, like a Horowitz, or brings in, or brings up, or gets from waivers, perform well, and my team wins,
Mhm.
I can't cheer for the team to do poorly just for a guy that I think is doing a poor job to get fired.
Yeah, and players come and go. The team will be here, and that's what I root for is the team, not so much the players. Like Aroldis Chapman, I have just as much resentment for Aroldis Chapman when he was with the Reds, but when he was a Pirate, hey, we're rooting for him. I want him to do well every time. It's about getting wins for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's not about wanting an outcome that justifies my opinion that I already had. Like, I'll say it here. I mentioned it to you before. With Canario, I was ready to DFA him when I saw him, running the bases poorly. And when he wasn't getting consistent at bats and he wasn't, hitting the ball. He had a hot streak where he showed me more. And I'm willing to give him more playing time and admit that, hey, he proved me wrong in what I said. And I think that, as a fan, we want the team to win. We need to be open minded with that. I don't want him to fail just because I said he should fail. I want him to succeed and help the Pirates win baseball games. And whether or not Charrington keeps his job, I think some people are thinking that automatically, if Charrington loses his job, then that means Donnie Kelly's going to lose his job, which is a likely outcome, but not
Yeah,
necessarily foregone because
yeah,
Donnie Kelly is interviewed for so many of these jobs that, he might be the right guy to whoever comes in and he might just end up keeping his job. So as much as we like Donnie Kelly, you know, it shouldn't prevent us from making the correct move with Charrington.
yeah, and it's gonna be. I mean, God, we've got so many games left here, but it just seems like that so much is in the negative. Like everything is doomsday, end of the world. I mean, for God's sake, Ben Sherrington had to answer the question of, is Paul Skeens like, the possibility of that? I mean, and that's all being drummed up by the national media, some of the terrible local media here. I mean, everybody saw, if anybody follows, at Bucs Basement, that I just kind of had enough this week, where it's just like, I mean, and it's not saying like, you young whippersnapper, you haven't been through what I've been as a Pirates fan, but then to me, it's just like, well, all of these people that are Pirates fans right now aren't going to completely go away if a certain player leaves, if a certain thing happens. Yeah, we may go dormant for a little while. We saw that I mean, God, I had, partial season tickets I think it was the beginning of the 2000s, towards the middle of that. Like, yeah, but it's still going to be Pirates fans. Like everybody, it's almost like, I don't know if it's like a secret society, you like cheer in private. Because, I mean, no matter where I've gone my entire life, no matter how bad the Pirates have been, the game is either on the radio someplace, it's in the background, at the family party. You may be complaining about them. You may be like frustrated. You may be, voicing every single concern that you have about the team and why they're bad and all this kind of stuff. But guess what you're still doing? You're still a Pirates fan. Like I don't think that goes away from people. And that's just like where my kind of mindset has been over the past week, is just general frustration with, like, I don't know, like you can change your, mindset. You can change maybe a little bit of what's going on in your life, and what you put into. You might not turn on every Pirates game when they're doing poorly as opposed to when they're doing well. But I just don't see us ever changing from being Pirates fans.
No, I'm not going to overnight become a Guardians fan.
No, that's not going to happen. I couldn't even pick a team. I mean, I'd be a White Sox fan because of my wife, but that doesn't even get me much further along, does it?
I like the Mariners, but it's too hard to stay up for those games.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say